The double leaf Nina Torres pressed her forehead against the cool marble pillar of the penthouse bathroom, steadying her breathing. Her reflection stared back at her from the gilt-edged mirror. Someone she barely recognized. The emerald green dress hugged her curves perfectly, a stark contrast to the baggy grey uniform currently stuffed in her backpack. At 28, Nina had become a master of invisible exits, slipping through the shadows of Manhattan's elite while harboring a secret that burned brighter than any chandelier in this $20 million apartment. The escape plan for 3 years. Nina had cleaned Dominic Hart's penthouse every Tuesday and Thursday evening. The tech entrepreneur was never home during her shift, always consumed by board meetings or charity galas or whatever occupied men who owned half of Silicon Valley. That predictability had become her salvation. While her hands scrubbed imported Italian tile, her mind rehearsed melodies. While she polished crystal decanters, her voice practiced runs in whispered tones. The Velvet Room downtown was holding auditions tonight, real auditions for their resident performer position, and Nina had exactly 37 minutes to get there. The rhythm of Survival. Nina's mother used to say that everyone had music in their bones, but not everyone had the courage to let it out. Growing up in the Bronx, Nina had sung in church choirs, school talent shows, anywhere that would let her voice soar free. But dreams didn't pay rent. Dreams didn't cover her younger brother's college tuition or her father's medical bills after the accident. So Nina had learned to compartmentalize, to be practical during daylight hours and desperate after dark. The moment of truth, she checked her phone again. 29 minutes now. The service elevator was just down the corridor, her escape route mapped and memorized. Mr. Hart's assistant had confirmed he wouldn't return until after midnight. Something about a tech conference in Brooklyn. Nina was safe. She had to be safe because this audition represented 3 years of sacrifice, of hiding sheet music in cleaning supply closets, of practicing vocal exercises in empty stairwells during lunch breaks. The transformationer applied deep burgundy lipstick with trembling fingers, the color of ambition and recklessness. She'd saved for 2 months to buy this dress from a consignment shop. The kind of elegant garment that made her feel like she belonged on a stage instead of beneath it. Her dark curls fell loose around her shoulders, free from the tight ponytail she wore while working. For just one night, Nina Torres the cleaning woman could disappear, and Nina Torres the singer could emerge. The fatal miscalculation shouldered her bag and opened the bathroom door, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood as she moved toward the service corridor. The apartment was silent except for the ambient hum of expensive air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city 30 floors below. Nina allowed herself a small smile. She was going to make it. She was going to sing. She was going to finally stop being invisible. Then, the private elevator chimed. The collision off. World's Nina's blood turned to ice as the elevator doors slid open with mechanical precision. Dominic Hart stepped into his own foyer, phone pressed to his ear, his tall frame commanding even in the simple act of returning home. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Nina made in 6 months, his dark hair slightly disheveled from whatever event he'd attended. He was discussing acquisition numbers, his voice carrying that particular tone of bored authority that came from making decisions worth millions before breakfast. The impossible freeze for a suspended moment. Neither of them moved. Dominic's sharp blue eyes lifted from his phone screen and locked onto Nina with laser focus. The conversation on his phone died mid-sentence as he lowered the device slowly, his expression shifting from distraction to confusion to something else entirely, something that made Nina's pulse hammer against her throat. The question that changed everything. She stood there in her emerald dress, caught between two identities, belonging fully to neither. Dominic ended his call without breaking eye contact, his footsteps deliberate as he moved toward her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but underneath ran a current of something dangerous. "Where exactly do you think you're going dressed like that, Miss Torres?" It wasn't curiosity in his tone. It was possession, challenge, and an intensity that made Nina realize her carefully constructed double life had just shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Neither of them fully understood yet, but Nina knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever happened next would change everything. The defiant stand Nina lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with a boldness that surprised even herself. She'd spent 3 years being invisible in this man's home, moving like a ghost through his expensive life. But standing here in this dress, with her dream waiting downtown, something inside her refused to shrink back into the shadows. "I'm going to sing, Mr. Hart," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm going to an audition, and I'm going to be late if this conversation continues." Dominic's eyes narrowed, traveling the length of her with an assessment that felt both invasive and electrifying. "You sing?" It wasn't a question, but Nina answered anyway. "Yes, every Tuesday and Thursday after I finish here. I go downtown to practice. Tonight is different. Tonight, someone might actually listen." The dangerous proposition. Dominic Hart hadn't built $1 billion empire by missing opportunities, and he certainly didn't miss the fire burning behind Nina Torres's carefully controlled exterior. He'd walked past her countless times over 3 years, offering polite nods while she scrubbed his floors, never truly seeing her. But now, in that emerald dress with defiance blazing in her dark eyes, she was impossible to ignore. "Sing for me," he said abruptly. Nina blinked. "Excuse me, right here, right now. You claim you're talented enough to walk away from your job for an audition." Dominic crossed his arms, his corporate negotiator persona sliding into place. "Prove it. Sing something, and if you're as good as you think you are, I'll drive you to your audition myself." The unexpected performance center's first instinct was to refuse, to push past him and run for the elevator. But something in his expression stopped her, a genuine curiosity that seemed at odds with his billionaire arrogance. She'd spent 3 years wondering if anyone would ever really hear her, really see her as more than just the help. Maybe this was the universe's twisted way of granting that wish. She set down her bag and took a breath that seemed to draw from the deepest part of her soul. Without accompaniment, without a stage, without anything but the marble floors and crystal chandeliers as her audience, Nina began to sing. She chose a classic, a Nina Simone piece about feeling good, about freedom, about breaking chains. Her voice filled the penthouse, rich and powerful, and achingly authentic. Each note a piece of her heart laid bare, the shift in power when the last note faded into silence. Nina opened her eyes to find Dominic staring at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Not pity, not condescension, but something close to wonder. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed almost vulnerable. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. Then, more firmly, "You're not going to that audition." Nina's defenses shot up immediately. "You can't stop me." "I'm not stopping you. I'm redirecting you." Dominic pulled out his phone, scrolling rapidly through contacts. "That dive bar you're running to. They'll pay you maybe $200 a week if you're lucky, and you'll sing to drunk patrons who won't appreciate what you have. You deserve better than that. The impossible offer. I have a friend who runs Constellation Records." Dominic continued, his fingers already typing. "Trevor Michaels. He owes me several favors. I can get you a real audition, the kind that actually leads somewhere, but it won't be tonight." Nina felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Constellation Records was one of the biggest independent labels in the country. Artists she idolized had recorded there. "Why would you do that?" Dominic looked up from his phone, and for a moment, his corporate mask slipped. "Because in the 3 years you've worked for me, I've been so busy building my empire that I forgot what it feels like to be surprised by something genuine. You reminded me tonight. Consider it payment for that gift." "The trust leap. I don't want charity," Nina said, even as hope fluttered dangerously in her chest. "I want to earn this, then earn it." Dominic's smile was sharp. "Trevor doesn't do me favors out of kindness. He does them because I helped fund his label when no one else would. But once you're in that room, it's all you. Your voice, your talent, your future. I can open the door, Nina, but you're the only one who can walk through it." Nina studied him, searching for the catch, the hidden price. but all she saw was sincerity mixed with something else, something that looked like loneliness wrapped in expensive suits and penthouses. The midnight confession. Why do you really care? She asked softly. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what it's like to have everything you're supposed to want and feel empty anyway? I have money, power, success. People respect me, fear me, want things from me. But no one surprises me anymore. No one challenges me. No one shows me something real. He gestured to her dress, to the courage it represented. Until tonight, when my cleaning lady decided to chase her dreams in an emerald dress, consequences be damned. The new arrangement, I'll make you a deal, Dominic said, his business instincts returning. You quit working for me. Effective immediately. I'll pay you 3 months' salary as severance, enough to give you breathing room while you pursue this. I'll arrange the audition with Trevor for next Friday, which gives you a week to prepare properly. In exchange, I ask only one thing. What? Nina asked suspiciously. Let me help, not as your employer, not as your benefactor, but as someone who wants to see what happens when real talent gets a real chance. Dominic's expression was earnest. I have a practice space in this building, a studio on the 20th floor. Use it. I'll stay out of your way. But the resources are there. Piano, recording equipment, whatever you need. The calculated risk. Nina's mind raced. This was insane. Billionaires didn't just hand opportunities to their cleaning staff, but as she looked at Dominic Hart, really looked at him, she saw something she understood: loneliness. He was offering her a chance, not just out of generosity, but because he needed to be part of something genuine, something that mattered beyond stock prices and board meetings. I have conditions, Nina said, surprised by her own boldness. Name them. First, I keep my dignity. This isn't Pretty Woman, and I'm not some project for you to mold. I make my own artistic decisions. Nina's voice was firm. Second, if this goes nowhere, if Trevor hates me or I bomb the audition, you don't get to say I told you so or treat me differently. We part as equals, not as failed employee and disappointed benefactor. The sealed agreement. Dominic extended his hand. Agreed. And I'll add one more condition of my own, if you make it. When you're singing at Madison Square Garden someday, you remember that someone believed in you before the world did. Nina took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the firmness of his grip that spoke of deals made and promises kept. I won't forget. Good. Dominic released her hand, but didn't step back. Now, let's get you out of that beautiful dress and into something more practical. We have work to do. Nina's cheeks flushed. Excuse me. Dominic laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. I meant, let's go down to the studio and start planning your audition. Get your mind out of the gutter. Miss Torres. The beginning of everything. As they rode the elevator down to the 20th floor, Nina caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. A billionaire and a former cleaning lady, standing side by side, about to embark on something neither of them fully understood. The emerald dress had been meant for a dive bar audition, but instead, it had opened a door to something far more complex and potentially dangerous. The studio was breathtaking, all sleek equipment and perfect acoustics. As Nina ran her fingers over the piano keys, Dominic leaned against the control board, watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. Play something, he said softly, and Nina did, her fingers finding a melody while her voice soared free. For the first time in her life, she wasn't singing in secret, wasn't hiding her dreams in the shadows. She was seen, heard, and believed in. Whatever happened next, whatever complications arose from this strange new dynamic, Nina knew that this moment, this night, had changed the trajectory of her entire life. The week of preparation, 7 days, had never felt so simultaneously endless and insufficient. Nina spent every waking hour in Dominic's studio, transforming from a woman who sang in stairwells to an artist who commanded space with her presence. Dominic kept his promise to stay out of her way, mostly, though Nina noticed him lingering in the control room during her late-night practice sessions, his laptop open, but his attention clearly elsewhere. "You're watching me again," Nina said on Thursday evening, not looking up from the sheet music she'd been annotating. "I'm working," Dominic replied without conviction. "You've been working on the same spreadsheet for 45 minutes. I can see the screen reflection in the glass." Nina finally met his eyes through the partition. "If you have feedback, just give it. I'm not fragile." The honest critical Dominic set down his laptop and pressed the intercom button. "You're technically perfect, but you're holding back. When you sang in the hallway that first night, you had nothing to lose. Now you're singing like you're afraid of disappointing someone." The observation hit Nina harder than she expected. "Maybe I am. Don't be." Trevor Michaels doesn't want perfect. He wants real. He wants the woman who wore an emerald dress to chase her dreams, not someone trying to fit into a mold of what she thinks a recording artist should be. Dominic stood and walked into the booth, his presence filling the small space. "Sing like I'm not here. Sing like you're back in the Bronx at your mother's church. Sing like you're free." The breakthrough moment. Nina closed her eyes and let herself remember. Her mother's voice joining hers on Sunday mornings. Her father tapping rhythms on the kitchen table. Her brother begging her to sing him to sleep. She remembered being 13 and belting out songs from her fire escape, not caring who heard. She remembered believing, with absolute certainty, that her voice could change things. When she opened her mouth this time, the sound that emerged was raw and unpolished and utterly authentic. She sang about struggle and survival, about cleaning other people's homes while dreaming of stages, about the impossible distance between who you are and who you want to become. Her voice cracked on the high notes, not from lack of skill, but from emotional honesty. When she finished, Nina opened her eyes to find Dominic staring at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "That," he said quietly, "is what Trevor needs to hear." The audition day arrived with cruel speed. Nina stood outside Constellation Records headquarters in Tribeca, her hands trembling despite the pep talk she'd given herself that morning. The building was all glass and steel, intimidating in its modern elegance. Dominic had offered to accompany her, but Nina had refused. This was something she needed to do alone. Trevor Michaels was younger than Nina expected, barely 40, with kind eyes and an easy smile that didn't match his reputation as one of the industry's toughest critics. His office was covered in platinum records and handwritten lyrics from artists Nina had grown up idolizing. "Dominic speaks very highly of you," Trevor said, gesturing for her to sit. "That's rare. He usually only calls in favors for tech startups, not aspiring singers." "I'm not aspiring," Nina said, then immediately regretted her boldness. I'm serious about this. About music." Trevor's smile widened. "Good. Confidence matters in this business. Why don't you show me what you've got?" The performance that mattered. Nina sang 3 songs, a classic she'd reimagined with a jazz twist, an original piece she'd written during one of her late studio nights, and finally, the raw emotional song from her breakthrough moment with Dominic. She sang without accompaniment, letting her voice carry the full weight of her story. When she finished, Trevor was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on his desk. "You have something special, Nina, something I haven't heard in a long time. Authenticity is rare in this industry. Everyone's trying to be the next viral sensation, the next manufactured pop star. But you sound like you've lived every word you're singing." "Because I have," Nina said simply. "The offer I want to offer you a development deal," Trevor said, pulling out a folder. "It's not a full recording contract yet, but it's a start. We'll work with you for 6 months, develop your sound, record some demos, see what resonates. If things go well, we move to a full album deal. The advance is modest, $20,000, but it comes with studio time, vocal coaching, and industry connections." Nina's vision blurred with tears. $20,000 was more money than she'd seen in her entire life. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Then read the contract carefully. Then say yes again after your lawyer looks at it." Trevor handed her the folder. "And Nina, don't lose that raw edge. The world has enough polished pop stars. What it needs is truth." The celebration. Nina practically floated out of the building, the contract clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She called Dominic immediately, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. He offered me a deal, a real development deal. Trevor said I was authentic, and there's an advance, and studio time, and I can't believe this is happening. Dominic's laugh came warm through the phone. I told you, talent always finds its way. Come to the penthouse tonight. We're celebrating. The complicated truth: when Nina arrived that evening, she found the penthouse transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, soft music played from hidden speakers, and the private chef was putting finishing touches on a meal that smelled divine. Dominic stood by the window, champagne flutes ready, his smile genuine and proud. "This is too much," Nina protested, but she couldn't suppress her own smile. Nothing is too much for someone who just changed their entire life in one afternoon. Dominic handed her a glass. "To Nina Torres, future recording artist, and the bravest woman I know." They toasted, and as Nina sipped the expensive champagne, she realized how much had shifted in just 1 week. Dominic was no longer her employer, and she was no longer his cleaning lady. But what they were to each other now remained undefined, hanging in the air between them like unsung notes. The honest conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Nina set down her glass, suddenly serious. "Anything. Why did you really do this? The studio access, the connection to Trevor, all of it. What do you get out of helping me?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes searching hers. "I told you before. You reminded me what it feels like to be surprised by something genuine. But there's more to it than that." He moved closer to her. 4 years. I've been surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, status. And then you walked into my hallway in an emerald dress, terrified but determined, chasing something purely because you loved it. Not for profit, not for recognition. Just for the love of music itself. The confession: you made me remember why I started my company in the first place. Dominic continued. It wasn't about becoming a billionaire. It was about building something meaningful, something that mattered. Somewhere along the way, I lost that. The deals became about numbers, not impact. The success became empty. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "Helping you felt like helping the part of myself I'd forgotten existed." Nina's breath caught at his proximity, at the vulnerability in his expression. "Dominic, this is complicated. A week ago, I was scrubbing your floors. Now we're drinking champagne, and you're telling me I've changed your life. That's a lot to process. I know, and I'm not asking for anything, Nina. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens next, whether you become a superstar or decide music isn't for you, you've already given me something invaluable. You've given me hope that authenticity still matters, that dreams are worth chasing, that people can surprise you in the best possible ways." The unexpected kiss. Nina didn't plan what happened next. One moment she was standing there, overwhelmed by his words and the impossibility of their situation. The next moment, she was closing the distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted like champagne and possibility and everything she'd been too afraid to want. Dominic responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and desperate, months of unspoken tension, finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nina saw her own confusion and desire reflected in his eyes. "That wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "No," Dominic agreed, "but I'm not sorry it did." The new beginning. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about his lonely climb to success and her struggles to keep her family afloat while pursuing her dreams. They talked about music and business and the strange paths that lead people to each other. They talked until the candles burned low and the city lights blurred into dawn. When Nina finally left as the sun was rising, the contract safely in her bag and Dominic's number programmed into her phone with a simple D that felt both intimate and thrilling, she knew her life had transformed in ways that went far beyond a record deal. 6 months later, Nina's first single dropped and climbed steadily up the charts. A year after that, she performed at a sold-out show, Radio City Music Hall. her voice filling the legendary venue with the same raw authenticity that had captivated Trevor Michaels. Dominic was in the front row, not as her benefactor or her patron, but as something more complicated and beautiful, a partner who had seen her potential when she was invisible to everyone else. As Nina took her final bow, the emerald dress she wore catching the stage lights, she caught Dominic's eye in the crowd. He was on his feet, applauding louder than anyone, his face transformed with pride and love. This was her moment, her triumph, her dream realized. But looking at him, Nina understood that the real transformation had nothing to do with fame or success. It was about being seen, being believed in, and having the courage to chase something purely because it made your soul sing. The girl who once scrubbed marble floors had become the woman commanding stages, and the billionaire who once walked past her without seeing had learned what it meant to truly look at someone. Together, they had rewritten both their stories, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with nothing more than a forbidden dream and the courage to pursue it.